hear me because I don't know how to turn on the mic.
Very nice. Okay, great. Well, much better. That song, are we too close to the speaker? That song was something that Tyler wrote when he was in rehab and played it for a talent show. We just didn't know that the rest of his life was going to be so great. But thank you all so much for coming. We appreciate the support as we process our grief. It's an ocean of grief right now. It's deep and vast. And we're standing on its shores, and it's just incoming tide hitting us in waves. We're looking forward to low tide, and I'm sure that's coming too. I want to thank Isha and Steve for restoring this jewel of a venue in downtown El Paso that helps elevate occasions such as this. Ty would have loved everything about this place. And Michael Frisbee, who manages this place for Isha and Steve and was Ty's best friend through high school and beyond, and with whom much music was written and played. And after this part's over, there will be a lot of music that they've written that will be just playing as we have a little reception after. I want to thank Vanessa Johnson, my amazing sister-in-law, who was playing the beautiful music to soothe our souls as everyone came in. And I want to thank Kate Gannon, who is going to lend us her beautiful voice to sing us out to the reception. Some friends and family have prepared remarks, and they'll be coming up next. And after Ty's cousin Hope sings, those of you in the audience who would like to share remembrances are welcome to come up here and do so. A little bit of an open mic, which Ty also would have appreciated. So Ty was first and foremost a musician. From the time he was 5 years old, we bought him a drum set, and he played it to shreds. And then we got him a guitar, and he went in his room for the weekend and immersed and played Knocking on Heaven's Door. Was his very first song that he ever played, and he just learned it by, going online and finding the tabs. Again, he was first and foremost a musician, and there's really no cure for that either. He had a girlfriend whose mom played in the symphony, and they jammed one time, and she approached me at one of their shows that the band was playing, and shook her head and sadly gave me her condolences and said, "That boy's a musician." There's just nothing for that. He was highly sensitive, but a lot of times, some of you who know him know he couldn't read a room. Counseling and therapy led him to the realization that he was on the spectrum, which explains a lot in retrospect. But he was fun and funny and smart and inquisitive, and he had a disease, a malady of the soul, some people call it. A substance abuse disorder, it's known as. He didn't want to die, but he didn't know how to live. His disease isolated him because he didn't want to disappoint us and couldn't admit how broken he felt until intensive therapy at Beit Shuba, a California rehab with a unique long-term approach, helped him understand. But he was loving and he was generous. Living in LA, he would carry extra umbrellas to hand out to homeless people. He treated everyone who shopped in the Beit Shuba thrift store where he worked as if they were clients at Bergdorf's and he was their personal shopper. We know this because when we visited there the day after he died, regular customers who just happened to be in the store approached us when they heard we were there and they heard what had happened, They lined up outside the office door where we were just meeting with the manager so he could fill in some blanks about Tyler's recent months. They approached us in tears, and I just wanted to hug and cry and tell us how much they loved him. These are just regular folks in the thrift shop, and it made me so proud. And it was comforting to know he was loved and understood, and he was having a good time in humble service to others. I used to tell him in recovery to try to live in the moment like dogs do. Enjoy the belly rubs, enjoy the food, nap, enjoy the sunshine. And I thought it would help him get through the days as he worked toward a sober life. But he was impatient, itchy, and couldn't see a future for himself. He really didn't know how to actualize this sober life. He relapsed when he was clean, which is always the most dangerous time, because you can't go back to the quantities you were doing before. He was detoxed and sober and nervous about going back to work when he made the ill-fated decision to smoke some fentanyl. You guys are hearing a lot about fentanyl these days, and that was fatal. In Zorba the Greek, by Nico's cousin Zacchus, the exuberant hero was asked if he had a family, and he replied, "Oh yes, wife, children, home, the full catastrophe." Some of you may understand this and may have the wisdom to embrace it or at least resign yourselves to it, because that's how life can be lived, as the full catastrophe. And when it seems just unbearable, I want you to know these words that have given me comfort through perspective. One day, we will all be the people who lived long ago. We're here a short time, ancient stardust experiencing life briefly in human form. And you have permission to enjoy yourselves, even today, maybe especially today, because rather than mourn my beautiful son's passing, we can join together and celebrate his short life. Thank you for coming and being here with us. Now I'd like to invite my dear nephew Aiden Wright, who has his PhD in psychology, which will soon become apparent as you hear him speak, just to say a few words. My darling Aiden.
Handy box of Kleenex here for anyone who decides they wanted to say something.
As Jennifer said, I am a clinical psychologist by training, and my day job is mostly figuring out how we should think about human behavior and its problems so that we can better help people with those problems. I spend most of my time studying how who we are is related to the problems we have, and so today I'll share some reflection from that vantage point. So a month ago, my younger cousin Tyler died of an accidental fentanyl overdose. And for many, or maybe all of us here, that was devastating and feared news. Most of us knew that Ty had struggled with an opioid use disorder for a long time, and while we held out hope that there would be a different outcome and things would turn around, we knew that this was a terrifying possibility. But knowing that doesn't mean that we aren't left grasping for an explanation. How should we understand this? Here are some thoughts I had. So I think it's important to highlight that opioid overdose death is tragically common in our country. In 2021, there are about 81,000 opioid overdose deaths in the U.S., and that's obviously a large number, but to put it into context, it's roughly twice as many as motor vehicle deaths and 4 times as many as heart attacks during that same year. The numbers have still been climbing since then. Those numbers are a little bit old. To put that into context too, it's a staggering number, but it's even more so when you consider that it's about 1,200%, 1,200% increase since 1999. Today, the vast majority of these deaths are fentanyl. an epidemic. I don't think there's any other way to really look at it. And so one way to understand Tyler's death is that he got caught up in a horrific epidemic that's claiming the lives of so many too soon. Not everyone shares the same risk for this, though. Opioid use disorder is strongly genetic. It's about 50% heritable, which means that about half the differences between who has trouble with opioids and who doesn't comes down to the biology that they're born with. Genetics are not destiny, but they have a powerful influence on us. For those in the over 40 set here, if you've ever tried to control your cholesterol with just diet and exercise, you know what I'm talking about. The old phrase, "he comes by it honestly," keeps coming to my mind when I think about Tyler. I'm certain that Tyler had a genetic risk for unhealthy substance use. And when you couple that risk with coming of age during the fentanyl epidemic, it's easy to see how he could find himself out of his death. It wasn't his fault. I could say a lot more about how opioids are naturally occurring substances, how our body creates variations of these chemicals, we have special neural receptors for them, and how they're essential for healthy human functioning. But that's all pretty clinical. It's important that we understand these things, but it's also antiseptic, intellectualized, and removed from who Tyler was as a person. You've probably heard the term addictive personality. Although it's an intuitive concept, the data don't bear it out. People use substances for all sorts of reasons, and harmful substance use is incredibly heterogeneous, and the pathway of use is deeply personal for each user. So I'd caution you not to write someone off as having an addictive personality. There's no such thing in each individual, especially Tyler, as so much more. Rather, in trying to come to terms with how we should consider who Tyler was as a man, a son, a brother, a nephew, a cousin, and a friend. So, while I've been reflecting on this, I keep having these flashbulb memories of Tyler. My earliest is seeing him in diapers at my dad's house on Aurora Street. There were quite a few from swimming pools in the summers. Several of them quarreling with Hillary in the backseat of Jefferson. Never seen legs kick so fast and so hard. Both of them. I can't help but laugh at the fact that he had a hipper taste in music at 7 than I did when I was 14 at the time. And ever since, for that matter. That's not saying much, as half my cousins will confirm, but we also all know just how precocious he was, especially in his musical talents, but in so many other ways as well. I also vividly remember the phone call with him after his first stint in rehab. I was in graduate school. It was a bright sunny day, and I talked to him by phone in the atrium of the psychology building at Penn State. What I remember most from that conversation is how troubled he was by all the suffering he saw among others in rehab. He was deeply touched and outraged by so many of their stories. Several years later, my wife Rachel and I were visiting Seattle and took him and his girlfriend out for dinner. And the part of the conversation that stands out to me today is the discussion of the homeless situation in Seattle. It was bad then, just as it is now, and it was clear that Tyler was acutely attuned to the plight of these folks. What these memories reflect for me is that Tyler had a deep capacity for empathy and feeling. For those who have that capacity, life can feel intense and unrelenting at times. The appeal of something that takes the edge off is understandable. I get it. From that angle, it's easy to see Tyler's sensitivity and capacity for deep feelings as a liability. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize just how valuable this capacity for empathy and deep emotions is. It makes for people who are caring family and friends. They are the ones who keep our society communal and connect and engender connection and affiliation among us. They can produce powerful art. I take some solace in knowing that my cousin Tyler had these capacities and was such a person. He touched all of us here, and our lives were enriched for having him. So, I want to close with some thoughts on grief. I know you're feeling it just as I am. You've probably heard about the 5 stages of grief. That's a good heuristic, but it's not prescriptive. It isn't experienced the same way by everyone, and for some the feelings will be stronger. Some will feel sadness, others frustration and anger or shame, others numbness, and some even a bit of relief. Most of us will feel them all to some degree or another, and we might come in and out of them. Grief hurts, but it has a purpose. It allows us to heal from loss, even deep and seemingly unbearable loss like this one. Part of the way it does that is it brings us together like we are here tonight. I'm glad to be here with you all, remembering Tyler.
I'm not really afraid of speaking in public, but I'm kind of afraid of crying in public, but we're just going to have to deal with that. My name is Susan, and I'm here today to join you in honoring our dear friend Tyler, who I knew since he was born. I moved to El Paso in the early 80s, so long ago, and was lucky that one of the first friends I made here was Jennifer Wright. Both of us had babies in 1987. My son Christopher and Tyler were fast friends from infancy. During their childhoods, Jennifer and I were able to take the boys and lovely Hillary on many little adventures. We went to White Sands, the Gila, Fort Davis, Disneyland, Austin, others that I can't bring to mind right now, but we had many, many good times. In the past month, I've revisited those memories, and they are so precious. I hope Tyler knew how much he meant to Christopher and me. I think he did. Jennifer, Hillary, Bob, Amanda, family, friends. Please know I grieve with you and will always remember our sweet, talented Tyler. I'm going to read a poem that I think Tyler would approve of. Let us all heed its words. This is Epitaph by Merritt Malloy. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved, and if you cannot give me away, at least let me live on in your eyes and not on your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. I'll see you at home in the earth.
Such a beautiful poem. Thank you. I traveled here, really wanting to celebrate Tyler and the person that he was. I'm a close friend of the Wright Palooza family since our kids were in elementary school. And I have two daughters, and they were right around Hillary's age. And so that was the focus, was the girls. Tyler was always, kind of left out, as it was always all about the girls. But one day, Jennifer called me. She was at work. She tied up in meetings, and she got a call from Tyler's school saying that he was sick and he needed to be picked up. She called me, and I, was able to go get him and took him home. And it's one of my favorite days. It was a day that I had the chance to spend time with Tyler one-on-one, know him, converse with him in a way that I hadn't had before. So when I remember Tyler, I cherish that day even more profoundly. And I'm here to share with you what I learned about him that day. Tyler was full of joy. You know, I picked him up and he was sick, but he was just so engaged and so interested in conversation, so interested in what I thought. Why did I choose that? You know, throw pillow on the cat, like silly things that you would think wouldn't matter to him. But he talked a lot about home and, you know, being the only boy in a house with two sisters. And it was very evident that he loved connection. He wanted to hear other points of view. He was interested in knowing what other people thought, especially if their perspectives were different. And I loved that about him. I thought it was incredibly impressive. He was maybe in his early teens at this time. And his level of curiosity and, again, connection was impressive. He was very kind and big-hearted. He was all about inclusion. He was the type of kid that always gave acceptance and kindness without judgment. He didn't judge anything. He didn't care what you thought, what your preferences were. He just wanted to support in every way. He loved beautiful things. He liked, you know, pretty things and home decor and being cozy and all of that. And it was very sweet. He was also creative through and through. And he worked his whole life at sharing his talents. And I found that through the years to be so incredibly brave. He had a passion and he was unapologetic in pursuing it. And for me, that's such an incredible example and inspiration. I think of Tyler and I try to be more brave through that. He was just a complete giver. He didn't miss an opportunity to give a compliment or words of encouragement to anybody that came his way. And so I'm here because I love Tyler. I love the Wright Palooza family. Every single one of them is extraordinary in every way. And so we're here for just a big hug and a celebration. A celebration of your family, how close you are, how much fun you've had, how much you've supported each other every step of the way. And Tyler's always going to live on in our hearts.
It's going to be pretty hard for me to probably get through, but so just bear with me. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Tyler and some of the memories I have of him. So I met Tyler before. I remember meeting Tyler. We were both born on the same year. My parents were friends before we were born. I wish I could tell you the first time I met Tyler, but I wasn't sentient yet. If I were going to divide my life into chapters, Tyler was a huge character in every chapter. 915-373 Gork. That was the number he had his entire life. Around the time when we both got cell phones, I remember him being so excited that he was able to claim the number 373 Gork. It wasn't a coincidence, he had requested it. Now I, on the other hand, been a man of many numbers. I've never been too attached to a phone number. Probably had at least 20 since I started using a cell phone. Every time I had to get a new number or a new phone or a new phone service. I always had Tyler's number in my heart. I didn't need his contact saved to call or text him. We'd always been in touch. We've been best friends our entire lives. One of my most formative experiences occurred when my mom and I went over to Jennifer's house to hang out with them when I was probably 7 years old. As soon as I came over, Tyler excitedly pulled me back to his mom's room so he could show me one of his most prized possessions, his first CD, the album Dookie by Green Day. Now prior to this, I had never even thought about owning the CD, had no taste in music, or any real idea as to whether I even really liked music. Started playing the CD, and pulled out the liner notes, and as it showed me the lyrics and all the cool artwork, I was blown away. For me as a 7-year-old, this was one of the coolest things ever. I realized that Tyler was way ahead of the curve in terms of his coolness to age ratio. Shortly thereafter, I obtained my first CD, also the album Dookie by Green Day. I have revisited that album time and time again throughout my life, and in my opinion, it's one of the best albums of all time. It's definitely a no-skipper, and also has the added bonus of a secret song, something I was also made privy to thanks to Tyler. A fond memory of Tyler was when we were both 9. Our moms took us to the Horde Festival in Las Cruces, Horde standing for Horizons of Rock Developing Everywhere. That year, the festival headliners were Rusted Root, Dave Matthews Band, Natalie Merchant, and Lenny Kravitz. After Rusted Root had finished, Lenny Kravitz was set to play, at which point Tyler exclaimed to me, "Oh man, Lenny Kravitz sucks." Now it's important to realize that in 1996, Lenny wasn't exactly a household name, and he was still a few years shy of the superstardom he achieved. I personally had no idea who Lenny Kravitz was or how Tyler had already formed such a strong opinion about him. When Lenny started playing, Tyler started to openly boo him while shouting things like, "Nobody likes you, Lenny Kravitz." As Lenny continued to play and I continued to listen, I too came to the conclusion that Lenny Kravitz did indeed suck. Joined Tyler in loudly booing him. It was 2 years later that Lenny really hit his stride when he released his brand new winning breakthrough album, Let Love Rule, which featured the second most annoying song of all time, American Woman, playing runner-up to only the first most annoying song of all time, Fly Away, also a single from that same album. So whenever I hear Fly Away while I was shopping at a grocery store or watching a Nissan commercial, I think about Tyler's strong feelings about Lenny Kravitz and how warranted they were. Tyler was a huge part of every chapter of my life. We went to elementary school, middle school, and even for a short time, the same high school together. Even when I moved to Austin for a few months, when I was 18 or 19, Tyler was going to college in San Marcos, and I would frequently drive to San Marcos to hang out with him over the weekend. We had both returned to El Paso eventually, and continued to frequently hang out while we lived there. I remember hanging out with him while he lived at the Sunset Grocery Building in Sunset Heights, spending many nights watching Adult Swim with him and Mike Frisbee on pirated cable television. And I remember him letting me sleep on his porch when I'd gotten kicked out of whatever situation I was in at the time. I'm sure a lot of people here will remember the Sunset Grocery days. Most of our friend group had either just started their adult life and were working shitty, low-paying jobs and living in slummy apartments. Nobody really had smartphones or internet service, and pirated cable TV was something you were really grateful for. Eventually, I moved to Seattle, and I spent a few years getting my life together a bit by quitting drinking and started going back to college. After a few years of living there, Tyler called me and said he was trying to figure out a living situation because he didn't want to go back to El Paso. I jumped at the idea of him moving to Seattle because I thought it would be so cool to share my new city with him and have him find his path. Shortly after staying with me for a few days at the old place I used to stay, we set out to find an affordable apartment. Eventually we landed on the spot, not exactly in the greatest part of town, but the apartment was nice for what it was and kind of came with a built-in community of young people who became our friends. Upon getting the keys and spending the first night there, we decided to have a walk around our new neighborhood and go to the gas station a block away. As we started walking, a man from across the street asked if we had a cigarette. We said we did not, and he started to pace us from across the street and yelled that he was going to come over there and beat us up. At this point, we immediately turned around and hightailed it back to our new apartment. Once inside the apartment and locking the door, we decided that we had our fill of exploring the neighborhood for the night. As we were safely inside, we kind of looked at each other and said, well, I guess this will be home for the next year. Glad we made this decision. Fortunately, that was the only event that occurred like that while we lived there, so it didn't turn out that bad. Living with Tyler was so much fun. We played and recorded a lot of music. Had El Paso friends stay with us when they visited, and I got Tyler to buy a bicycle and had a lot of fun riding around the city with him. Eventually he moved back to El Paso, but I really wish he would have stayed. It was sad to see him go, but we still kept in touch. I kept in touch with him over